He spent over 3 years in Tilray as both country manager and European alliance manager. In late 2021, he chose to part ways with Tilray and started offering independent cannabis advisory services. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Stephen George from SAC Consulting.
Minor technical issue there, sorry about that. Good morning, everyone. Bom dia a todos. Bom dia, bom dia. Thank you. That's going to be the only Portuguese for today, though, okay? The rest of this is going to be in English. But my name is Stephen George. We're going to be talking today about North America versus Europe. Same plant, different regulations. First off, I want to tell you a little bit about my cannabis journey. So I am from Lansing, Michigan. This is unique because Michigan was one of the first states or one of the earlier states to approve medical cannabis back in 2008. So in 2009, I received my medical cannabis card. I was able to grow 12 plants at home. In 2010 and 2011, I grew 4 plants in my one bedroom of my apartment, where I started to get a little bit more interested in cannabis in general, as well as the medical purposes. And in 2017, I moved to Portugal. Uniquely, what many people mistake, I did not move here for the cannabis industry. The cannabis industry followed me here. That is what I believe. But I did get here in 2017 where I did the Lisbon MBA. Many of you are familiar with that, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. So, why listen to me? First off, I said I did the Lisbon MBA in 2017, and I graduated from that at the end of the year of 2017. In that class, though, I had one Portuguese physician. There was only 40 students, one Portuguese physician, one Portuguese pharmacist, and one brand manager for a large pharmaceutical company. These 3 individuals helped me a lot understanding the pharmaceutical network in Europe, as more specifically also in Portugal, and were a big help in me into getting my position with Tilray, which you see next. So I spent 3.5 years with Tilray as both country manager as well as the European alliance manager. The dried flower THC 18 that was talked about yesterday a lot, that was the team that I led to get that product approved into the market. I wish there was more today, but at least there's one. So that was my time at Tilray. Also worked with a lot of different partners across Europe in the B2B market, Germany, Malta, Spain, and also our friends in Israel. Last year in July, I left Tilray and then went on to start my own advising company. That's what I've been doing for the last year, advising different companies here in Portugal, also internationally, mostly on commercial strategy. It's one of the big things that I found. Everyone keep this in mind if you're thinking of starting a project or you're thinking of cultivating or manufacturing or whatever it is, you need to have a strong commercial strategy before you start. You cannot just grow cannabis. It does not just sell itself. That is a huge mistake. Today I'm going to talk about adult use cannabis more, but before that, I want to tell you that I am medical first. As you can see here, this is a childhood friend of mine. This part might be a little bit tough, but as you can see, he just passed away last Wednesday, unfortunately from an overdose of heroin. This is a huge problem in the US, and the point is that he didn't start with heroin. He started with prescription medicine, okay? And it was opioids, which then led to heroin, which then led to 33-year-old Sean no longer with us. His funeral was just on Wednesday. So medical first, okay? This is the point. Patients need access. Everyone should be able to have access to medical cannabis. Like I said, I'm going to talk about adult use. I believe it has its wellness properties as well, but it's medical first, and that's why we need to keep things moving here in Portugal, and that's why everyone needs to work together and collaborate, like Tej said, so that we can move this market forward and meet the patient demand. The agenda for today, I'm going to talk about a little bit difference between the medical and adult use cannabis. We're going to do an overview of the United States adult use market, and then a little bit of what I expect to see in Germany, carrying off what we kind of heard yesterday afternoon. I'm going to have a key takeaway from every section. First one, terrible use of words. It should be cannabis for medicinal purposes and cannabis for adult use purposes. It's not medicinal cannabis or adult use cannabis, okay? It's the purpose that matters. Why? Because it's all cannabis. There's nothing different about medical cannabis than there is about adult use cannabis. Form factors can look different, regulations can look different, specifications can look different, but it all comes from the same plant in the end. But when we dive into regulations, you see a lot of different things, right? In the EU market, you get a prescription per unit. Products are dispensed in the pharmacy, and it's regulated by a national health regulator. In the US, you get a card or a recommendation from the doctor. You pick up products in retail dispensaries, and it's regulated by the individual state regulator, not the FDA, which we all know, the Federal Drug Administration, that deals with all the other medicines in the US, okay? And finally, when we look into a little bit of cannabis adult use in the US, consumers above a certain age have access. It's 21 usually. Products are distributed in retail dispensaries, and it's regulated by the individual state regulators. Now let's break down the medical markets. I think this is a huge opportunity for Europe, okay? Is because, and when I break them down and look at the US market and Europe market differently, the US market did a great job of providing short-term patient access, okay? After regulations were implemented, very quickly could individuals get cards, dispensaries open quite quickly, and patients could access products and different medicines, cannabis medicines, right? So that was great for short-term access. But if you look at the actual regulations with the one card, it doesn't involve the healthcare community much at all, okay? Besides getting that initial recommendation from the doctor. Other than that, you just have to renew with the state every year. So it's not really a great medical program, right? Where I think Europe is doing a great job of long-term access for patients, right? Because of that pharmacy distribution, because of treating it like other medicines, it has the longevity to stick around. Whereas oftentimes in the US, once a state goes adult use, the medical market more or less stays stagnant or starts to die. Again, because there's not that healthcare professional involvement. That's my personal opinion on it. So the European market, I think the reason they have that longevity is because pharmacy distribution. I think this is a clear opportunity for them. Also, when we move forward into adult use with Germany, I'll hit on this in a little bit, but that there should be a clear distinction between cannabis for medicinal purposes being offered in a pharmacy, cannabis for adult use purposes being offered in another retail location, okay? There's an opportunity for a clear distinction, where in the US, in a state like mine, Michigan, you go to the same exact dispensary whether you're a medical patient or an adult use patient. Same place, major difference is the tax you pay, okay? Now let's take a little bit deeper look into that US market. Takeaway again from this section, Europe adult use cannabis markets will be more restrictive, will have higher quality standards, and less form factors. Current situation. Also, you'll see a lot of these pictures here are my pictures, okay? I was in Michigan for 3 weeks just recently, and so I visited a lot of, this is a dispensary in Ann Arbor, Michigan, to have a little bit of look inside. Also, you'll see here, I don't know where the, okay? So these are some extracts. You'll see these are vape cartridge extracts, you know, very branded as well, so Mitten, which is, we call Michigan the Mitten. And then here's some edibles as well. But currently, dispensing in retail stores, many different form factors available. Many states allow individuals to grow at home, and some states now have consumption lounges as well. Think of this as a cannabis bar. Here's a little video. It's only about 15 seconds long, but this is another dispensary in Lansing, Michigan, my hometown. This is quite a nice one. It's a brand new one. You can see that some people go quite far with this, right? And there's tons of different form factors that you're seeing. Pre-rolls, I mean everything, oils, vape cartridges, edibles. So this is what a dispensary looks like inside, okay? The owner needs a license from the state to sell, licensing like everything else. Most have an initial waiting room where you come in, they check your ID, you get through the waiting room, then you go into a large showroom like you see in the video where you can choose products, and then there's a counter where you can go and purchase. Clients are not allowed to use products in the store, okay? Who works in a dispensary? Well, luckily, Luna gave a great presentation yesterday about bud tenders. And this is the bud tender definition from Weed Map, so I'll read it to you. It's an employee who works at a storefront and represents the cannabis dispensary. Bud tender is responsible for educating consumers about cannabis products. While they are typically not medically trained, these marijuana dispensary employees serve as an important guides to using cannabis products and tailor their customer and patient services to all levels of experience. Here's some of the different form factors you'll see. Again, this is a photo from back home, but you got a vape cartridge here. These are 2 different cannabis flowers packaged, and then here are some edibles, 100 milligrams of THC, 10 different edibles with 10 milligrams each, but as you can see, a whole list of different form factors available in these different stores. Now when we look at the actual state of Michigan regulations, okay? You got to be 21 and up. You can possess up to 2.5 ounces. That's 70 grams. Within individual's home, you can grow up to 12 plants, and you can also have up to 10 ounces, correct? 280 grams of flower. Now, anything over 2.5 ounces has to be locked in a lock or a safe, let's say. And individuals can also possess and manufacture and buy paraphernalia. Think of smoking pipes and vaporizers. When we look into the licensing, okay, it's regulated by the Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs. There's the MRA, which is the Marijuana Regulatory Agency that handles all of this. There's 6 different licensing categories. It encourages social equity, what we've talked about today. It's an uncapped licensing structure, which is interesting because I've seen quite a drastic drop in prices from when I was back home in August to when I was home just last month. So that's kind of interesting and something to keep an eye on. You know, what will happen with pricing when you have these uncapped licensing structures. And they're in effect for 1 year and then need to be renewed. Don't want to leave Canada out of the, not cannabis, it's definitely in the conversation, but don't want to leave Canada out of the conversation. Very similar, Ontario is the largest market in the Canadian market. It's actually the Canadian neighbor to Michigan, so very familiar with Ontario as well. Have a similar model, but it's a bit more restrictive. You can see less, you're able to possess less, you're able to grow more at home, but they also have multiple form factors available as well, so a pretty similar model. When we look at licensing as well, you can see that there's multiple different licenses available in Canada, similar to the Michigan market as well. I think they even have a couple more categories than Michigan, but that gives you a little bit of an insight into licensing in Canada. But here's some more insight, and I think this is quite an interesting slide, right? And again, I think it's because Canada does not have this same EU, more pharmaceutical-driven medical model. But you can see in this 2-year period, this is all on Canada.ca as well. They publish all this data, so you can go and look and kind of understand what's going on. But, I mean, you can see here, over this 2-year period, a small increase in medical sales, while in adult use sales, almost 100% increase, right, in the same exact 2-year period. So it shows that you really need this clear distinction because oftentimes, even in Canada as well as the United States, when that adult use market comes, the medical market seems to kind of lose steam. Finally, another interesting topic, though, of why adult use regulation is good, okay? I think this is also one of the most important slides of what Canada has shown here, but that at a point into this regulation, you finally see that the illicit sales drop below the adult use sales, okay? And that's what we're here for, right? This is the reason, right? It has to do with harm reduction, but it also has to do with eliminating this war on drugs, right? That's what this whole thing started for, was this war on drugs. So this is another option, and it shows that it clearly works, and it clearly slows down the illicit sales. Last section today, and this is more personal opinion, if you will, of what I expect to see in Germany, knowing what I know from the U.S. But the key takeaway, again, non-pharmacy retail store for the sale of cannabis for adult use purposes works well for distribution. I think Germany will make a humongous mistake if they offer the adult use cannabis in the pharmacy at first. Some stuff that I've read, I know in the beginning it was talked about more. It doesn't seem so much now. But I've still seen recent papers of lawyers and advisors in Germany that mentioning that it could start in the pharmacy and then transition into a retail store. But I think it's a huge mistake. Current situation, kind of talked on this yesterday. The regulators announced last year that they would move forward with an adult use regulation in Germany. We still lack a lot of information regarding what they're going to do. Said we do have the old bill proposed that kind of gives a bit of an insight, but as of right now, a lot of questions left to be figured out. We do expect to see something later this fall from the regulators, and it will be the first cannabis for adult use commercial market in Europe, right? We've seen also Malta and Luxembourg make some moves, but it's not a commercial market, right? I would consider it more a consumer-based regulation, which is also favorable as well, right? I believe that they're at least taking one step forward. So a couple different questions. Where is it going to be sold? Who will work in the store? Will they stick with EU GMP? What form factors? And how will licensing work? I'll run through all of these quickly for you. So again, I think they should consider the non-pharmacy distribution. I think it makes the most sense. They will have to roll out some stores, retail stores. I don't think you should be mixing both the medical use of cannabis with the adult use of cannabis. They've also mentioned there will be specific individual requirements within the store for employees, but no one has any idea what that means. Does that mean they'll need scientific experience? Does that mean they'll need medical experience, healthcare experience, cannabis experience? Who knows, right? So I think the challenge is there's a limited number of individuals with knowledge in this space, and that's why we're faced with this challenge moving forward into Germany and having some clear words like this. Who's that going to be? Will they stick with the EU GMP? I think there's a high probability, right? This has kind of been an established thing here in Europe, much different than what we see in North America. But I think it's quite clear that this is the standard moving forward for EU cannabis. We'll see what they do. I don't know if they'll, find something else, but that's what I believe. The challenge there, it's capital intensive. There are a limited number of manufacturers currently operating with the certification in Europe. So when they talk about that 400 tons of demand, if it's all coming from EU GMP facilities, it's going to be a bit difficult, but also a lot of partnering opportunities will be made available as well. What form factor should you expect? I think you'll see flour and formulated oils for sure, right? And I know yesterday we talked a lot about maybe just seeing flowers first, but they have experience with both flowers and formulated oils in Germany for 5 years, if not more now, right? So I think those are two things that could easily make the cut. I think vape should be in there as well. I don't think they'll make the cut in the beginning. I think they should. It offers non-combustion opportunity for the inhalation of cannabis, so I think it's a good thing. Edibles, drinks, and other food-related products, I think that'll be much more complicated, and will take a bit more time to figure out how that works and get those implemented into the market. How will the licensing work? This is, again, I don't really have a great idea yet, but again, it will be distributed in specially licensed shops. They never mentioned, though, will this be a pharmacy or other retail store? So we'll have to wait and see, right? Again, that expected demand is 400 tons a year, which means I believe Germany will have its own cultivation and manufacturing in the national territory. There was some reasons yesterday mentioned why it's not economically the best decision, but I think they'll have it in-house. I think they'll cap the licensing, but ultimately, because of that supply challenge, they're going to depend on imports quite a lot, which is why depending on some of the treaty stuff that Alfredo mentioned, Portugal could end up playing quite a big part in that. Final takeaways that I have for you today. Germany will set the standard, I believe, for other European countries. I believe other European countries will implement regulations after Germany. Germany is a powerhouse, large country. I think once they set the stage, it'll make it much more easier for other countries to kind of follow along, if you will. And then I think it'll be more normalized as we move forward here in Europe. Again, right now, still the focus, especially in a place like Portugal, is medical access for patients. We're still not doing well here. We still have tons of work to do here. But we also have to realize that this is coming. This is on the forefront, so we need to be prepared for an adult use market here in Europe as well. So thank you, everyone, and I'll take any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. So questions and answers, here we go. There you have.
Hi, Stephen. Thank you for your insightful presentation. I would like to ask you, well, you are clearly advocating for a clear distinction between retailing medical cannabis and adult use. It's clear for me. What about production? Do you think regulators will, so do you think that in terms of production, regulators will enforce that the production should be made in different facilities, or it could be made in the same facility? That's the question.
Oh, thank you for the question. It should be in the same facility. There's no reason to have another facility for, again, it's all cannabis, right? It's the purpose and the use that matters, right? It's the end distribution to the what client sector is it going, or consumer sector is it going to, right? That's the important thing. There's no reason to then have the extra money going into building more facilities, bigger facilities, more energy, more consumption. It doesn't make sense, right? They should allow the operating medical to even if they have to get another license, whatever, but to be able to operate in that adult use market as well.
Thank you. We have another one there.
Hi, Steve. First of all, thank you very much for bringing such good content. And thank you very much also for emphasizing so much the medical side. I think it's perhaps we are all here mostly for the medical side. And I would like to do two questions, to make two questions. One is regarding the ACM, the marketing placement authorization. What are the biggest reasons for Tilray having only one product approved? If it was mostly because Infarmed are putting too many regulations, or was an internal decision from Tilray? And the second question is, in our neighbor country, Spain, I think they are now having a huge discussion in the parliament. What do you think about the medical market in Spain for cannabis products?
For sure.
you.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. I'll start with the first one with the ACM. So this is challenging, and what I want to, and because we talked about a lot about this yesterday, so I think it's very important, is that regulations from country to country in Europe are much different. Okay, and if you look at the process for registering a product in Germany, and compare it to the process to registering a product in Portugal, it's much more difficult, okay? The quality standards are even higher, specifications, they follow the module 3 of the technical document, which is the same technical document that they use for all of their medicines. So one of the bigger challenges with cannabis is keeping that consistency, right? And a lot of companies are, like I said, this is newer in this more highly regulated market. So a lot of companies with experience in Canada and the US didn't have to have these tight of specifications. So really, like I said, it's learning on and understanding on the producer and manufacturing side, and then also there's the regulator component of just having extra difficulties, right? And when, like I said, it's difficult, right? But I'm a business guy. I come from finance, so we also have to understand the reality of this, right? So you have an easier market to register a product with 80 million people, and you have a harder market to register a product with 10 million people. If you're the owner of a company, where are you going to register a product? I mean, seriously, where are you going to register a product? Okay? I think that's most important, right? So everyone needs to realize that. So the regulators need to work better with the manufacturers, with the cultivators here in Portugal to make these products available in the market. It's not just the producer's fault. It's not just the regulator's fault. They all need to work together.
Thank you.
Thank you. And just quickly on the second question? Spain. Okay. Spain's interesting, right? So I spent as Tilray, as the country manager, I spent time in Spain as well. I sat across the table from a director of the AEMPS, which is the health regulator there, telling me that there's already a clear way to register a cannabis product in Spain. Okay? And so this is this is what I feel their position is, right? They are debating it more now, but for the last years, this has been their position. And it's interesting because GW Pharmacies, that's now owned by Jazz Pharmaceutical, does a lot of their clinical trials there in Spain. So I have my own little speculations of why Spain is holding back a bit on their medical cannabis regulations, but that's for another day. So, yeah, I think I think they'll pump the brakes as long as they can.
Thank you, Steve. Any other questions? There's two more, one here and one right over there.
Hi, thank you very much for your presentation. My name is Ricardo. I have a question regarding, well, further side of Europe. When we think about what's happening in Germany and the potential development of the market there, do you have a vision on what may happen to Poland and what be the decisions of the Polish government regarding the market and how it can threaten the investments in Portugal?
You know, it's a good question, and I think I talked to one of your colleagues about this the other day. But yeah, it's interesting, right? Because the Poland market is starting to develop on the medical side as well. When I was with Tilray, we were working on that quite a lot. So it's interesting, you know. I still think, but I still think you're forced to do indoor cultivation, which is good, okay? But also there's other economical ways to cultivate cannabis, right? And much more cost-effective ways to cultivate cannabis. So I think Poland still struggles with that challenge, having to have mostly indoor production, right? And then what's the knowledge base there? You know, I think yeah, labor costs are lower, but then what's the knowledge base? You know, what's the professionalism of the health care professionals there, right? Or understanding of adult use market moving forward. So I think they could be a player, but I do think that Portugal, because of its runway, has established itself as a strong cultivation manufacturing country in the European Union for this market. And again, you know, I think some of that then, but again, there's this part on the regulators, right, where we need to get some things cleared up. We need to get patients access to products. We need to get them in the market, or else I think the only threat is operators getting a little bit discouraged maybe with Portuguese regulators, okay? This could be a potential threat in the future, and then they look to go somewhere else. But still, I don't know if Poland will be the first option. But it's definitely on the table.
Thank you, Stephen. And last question, one last question.
Thank you, Stephen, for your presentation. One question that
I am sorry, a little bit louder.
One question that I'm very curious after being in the United States for quite some years, learning more about this plant, and seeing that here in Europe we are in a very initial phase in terms of research. Do you think, considering your title, One Plant, Different Regulations, and seeing here Europe and North America, do you think it will be possible to dream with one regulation between these two places, like North America and Europe, considering like trading in this market, you know?
I think it'll open up for trade, right? I think they'll always be regulated different. I think the European Union just looks at things different than North America or the U.S. government, right? Especially when it comes to quality standards and things like that. So I never think there'll be the exact same regulation. I think it will open up the trade, though, possibly, right? And I think what's super interesting right now is when I go home in North America, they have a lot of knowledge and experience in form factors and manufacturing, different products available. What everyone kind of forgets, though, is that you're locked into your state. So even if you want to operate in another state, you have to actually have a partner there that produces the product, or you have to actually cultivate and manufacture in that state to operate it. So no one in the U.S. is really getting a grip on the global trade of cannabis, where everyone else playing in this global medical market, Canada, South America, South Africa, Europe, Australia, is understanding the global trade of cannabis. So, you know, we're getting that advantage. If the FDA move forward and put forward some medical regulations, then I think this would be possible. You'd have imports and exports, you know, much sooner, right? But then when you move into adult use as well, if we have a national regulation, that's the thing in the U.S., it has to be a national regulation for them to do anything globally. If it always stays at this state level, it'll remain just the U.S. thing, right? So that's the key. I mean, first, the U.S. needs to take more federal level execution of this. And I mean, first, it should be medical cannabis, obviously, and so that they can start to get into that trade and share some of the knowledge that physicians have there, and also learn from what's going on here in Europe.
Thank you, Stephen. Please, an applause for Stephen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.